This is the final episode for the Rise of Skywalker season, and I'm going to do a little presentation. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Xanthe Tan, feel free to call me Xanthe, and this episode covers minutes 141 through 142 of the Rise of Skywalker. In other words, we've reached the end of the film and the end of the season of Star Wars Music Minute. I mean, TROS season of Star Wars Music Minute. Here is the agenda. First, I'm going to go through all of the music and sound credits and explain what the various jobs entail. Then, we will compare the transition to end credits across all 9 Skywalker Saga films. There are some interesting trends culminating in The Rise of Skywalker, and I want you to weigh in on your favorites. Next, I will play the podcast intro-outro music that you've been hearing at the beginning and end of each episode. I will play that in its entirety and reveal all of the musical themes that are laced into it. This was a challenge I posed in the first episode of this season, so I guess this is the reveal of the answer. Then, as is custom on this podcast, I will read all of this season's guests' answers to the question, what does Star Wars sound like? And then I will answer the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire myself. But before I start, I have a question for you. It's regarding the season order, the movies that I'm doing on this podcast. Obviously, I want to cover all of the live action theatrical releases, but so far, this is what I've done. I've done The Last Jedi was season 1, season 2 was A New Hope, season 3 was Solo: A Star Wars Story, and then Empire Strikes Back, and now it's been Rise of Skywalker. Ideally, I would have done this in release order, but I also wanted to sync up with the Star Wars Minute podcast, which was already in the sequel trilogy when I started this podcast. So my plan was always to continue with the rest of the films in release order, starting with Return of the Jedi. But up till now, the podcast has kind of had an interesting rhythm, switching off between older films and newer films, and it also might be fun to continue that. So I guess the question for you is, would you rather I continue with the rest of the movies in order, which means next season is Return of the Jedi, then Phantom Menace, then Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then The Force Awakens, and then since I already did Last Jedi, so skip that, and then end with Rogue One? Or would you rather I keep alternating? Return of the Jedi next, then Phantom Menace, then Force Awakens, then Attack of the Clones, then Rogue One, and then Revenge of the Sith? Anyway, this won't affect my next 2 seasons, which will be episode 6 and episode 1 regardless, but leave your answer in the comments. I am curious, and I have a while to ponder this. Anyway, now on to the presentation. I'm actually cheating a little bit. I'm not just doing minutes 141 through 142, which is the tail end of the end credits. I'm actually going to tackle the entirety of the end credits, so maybe the past 10 minutes. And I believe I have isolated every single credit that is listed in the film that is related to music and sound. And similar to what we did for the Solo season finale, I'm going to explain what the various jobs do. I think I'm going to go into more detail this time, and it won't be merely a repeat of what you heard in Solo: A Star Wars Story. Also, some of the roles are different. So, the first one we have is music by John Williams. The next one is, and the screenshots are kind of grainy, but hopefully you can still see them. I'm circling them on screen. The next one we have is Supervising Music Editor Ramiro Belgart. A music editor is tasked with compiling, editing, and syncing the music for the film, as well as making a temp track. Music editors are like a liaison between the composer and director. They're often the ones that make the temp track, as I mentioned. And then after a composer writes something to picture, a music editor typically will suggest places to make tweaks, or they think places the music should cut, or cut to something else. And they work with the composer before presenting the cue to the director. And sometimes the music editor also tells the composer when things are being added and how that's affecting their cue. It was actually Ramiro Belgart's idea to use the music for Yoda lifting the X-Wing for when Luke raises the X-Wing in this movie. John Williams discusses this in the making of the Rise of Skywalker documentary. So, the music editor can sometimes influence what cues we hear in certain places in the film. And I know that's a question that comes up, when we talk about Star Wars music all the time. Like, why do you think they used this here? And sometimes the answer is just maybe a music editor thought it would be a good idea there. And so maybe that is what influenced, that to happen. I'm going to show, I have a screen here. Sorry, I have a little picture of Ramiro Belgart holding a cello. Ramiro Belgart is a cellist himself. He has a Bachelor of Music in cello performance from the University of Michigan. And people who do this job in general, supervising music editors, are often trained musicians themselves who need to be able to read the score and really understand how to work with the music being composed. Belgart worked on Revenge of the Sith, and he also temp music edited for J.J. Abrams' Super 8 and 2 Star Trek reboots. So not his first time working with J.J. Abrams. And he actually got his start in the movie industry in 2002, assisting Ken Wanberg, who is John Williams' longtime music editor, on Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can, both with Steven Spielberg. So as the supervising music editor, Belgart was likely at the scoring sessions for Rise of Skywalker, sitting in the booth, following the score, and maybe even editing freshly recorded stuff to make temporary mixes, although it's also possible that the scoring editor did this too. I'm not exactly sure how the responsibilities broke down because it's slightly different on every film. Okay, the next thing we have is supervising sound editors Matthew Wood and David Accord. Supervising sound editors are so important. They are responsible for the entire sound world of the movie. They usually start by having a conversation with the director and hopefully reading the script and, if possible, watching the film or footage. And they discuss the vision for the film and various ideas. And then they assemble the teams they're going to need for all the various aspects of the sound. And then often they're also having to talk about budget and how they're going to make everything happen. They also decide what to do with the production sound that was captured during shooting. So they'll be determining where ADR is needed, where sound effects are going to go, Foley, music, walla, which is crowd noise. And they oversee all of the dialogue editors, sound effects editors, music editors, and they have to make sure that post-production sound stays on schedule. In the case of Matt Wood and Dave Accord, they both also played other creative roles, so they weren't just supervising it. They're also their hands are very much in it as well. But yeah, they have an enormous responsibility. Matt Wood has been doing the supervising sound editor role since The Phantom Menace. So he's, if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard his name a ton already. He's, also does a lot of voices that we've heard throughout the movies and the TV shows. I've mentioned this many times this season, but there's a wonderful interview on the Dolby Institute podcast with Matt Wood and Dave Accord talking about the sound of the Rise of Skywalker. I will be referring to that Dolby Institute interview a lot throughout this presentation, and I'll put a link in the show notes so you can listen to that. It's really a fantastic interview. Listen to it yourself. Okay. Next we have, we're on the same slide, but next we have sound designer David Accord. So yeah, like I said, also doing a creative job there. And then below him, we have Andy Nelson and Christopher Scarabozio doing the re-recording mixing job. So they were re-recording mixers, and their job is also super important. I mean, we're still in the very first crop of people that are mentioned after music by. This is before cast. So after the supervising sound editors are done with their job, the completed soundtrack is sent to the re-recording mixer. And then the re-recording mixers have the final responsibility of getting the entire sound mix of the film ready to go and balanced and mastered. As the name suggests, they are incorporating everything that's been recorded, re-recorded, dubbed, and everything. They give the films that final stylistic sound cohesion. Okay, the next thing we have is cast, which I'm not going to read, but I'm just going to call attention to voices of Jedi past, because that was a sound job, right? So we have the people who played Anakin Skywalker, Luminara, Ahsoka, Aayla Secura, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Adi Gallia, Kanan Jarrus, and Qui-Gon Jinn. Their names are on screen. And I think the minutes where we talked about this scene where Rey is summoning all of the Jedi, they're all speaking to her. I believe that was in episode 24, Dubstep Lightning with James Waterman and Justin Scheid. I think I was unsure of some of the names in that episode. So here we all have them listed in the credits, and that's good. Okay, the next thing we have is the ADR section. The ADR section. So ADR, also known as automatic dialogue replacement, is when actors come back to the studio after filming and redo their lines while trying to match the original performance. Or, they're not always able to come to the studio. There are numerous stories of like Adam Driver and Ian McDiarmid recording like by the beach or recording in a closet. But anyway, it's basically when the actors have to record or re-record dialogue. Sometimes it's to redo their lines, and sometimes it's to say different lines because the script changed. So it happens sometimes when you have separate actors for a character's body and voice, or when a line is changed, or if they weren't able to capture a clean recording on set. So the ADR mixers are responsible for matching everything up and getting things to sound as cohesive as possible. But of course, first we have casting. So that was Terry Douglas. And then we have an extensive list of additional voices. Let's see if there's some familiar names, like Terry Douglas herself added some, Dave Accord, D. Bradley Baker. You'll see a lot of familiar names, David Collins. Just lots of people who are in lots of Star Wars movies. See Sam Witwer, of course, Matthew Wood, Deborah Wilson. Yeah, so those are additional voices. And then we have actually kind of a lot of ADR mixers here. I'm going to circle that section in green. So ADR mixers, we have 2 from Goldcrest Films in London. We have 2 from Harbor Picture Company, 2 from Walt Disney Studios, and 2 from Skywalker Sound, Matt Wood and Trey Turner. And so like I said earlier, the ADR mixers are responsible for matching everything up and getting things to sound cohesive. My guess is that multiple studios are credited because maybe they recorded ADR at all of these different studios and used in-house mixers for each of those. I'm not entirely sure, but that's just a hypothesis. Okay, next we have the sound heading. Lots of stuff in this section, beginning with production sound mixer, Stuart Wilson. Okay. Production sound is the sound that is recorded on set during filming. So a production sound mixer is the person responsible for capturing good quality dialogue during said filming. This can actually be really hard to do because sometimes the location is noisy or the shot is such that it's going to be hard to conceal microphones in decent places. But a lot of directors really do prefer using production sound. And of course, like if I were an actor, I think I would prefer to be able to be acting in the scene in the moment and have that dialogue be used rather than to re-record it later. But, if they can't capture good production sound, that's when they resort to ADR. A few other things about the production sound mixer job, because honestly, this is another huge one. If you're going to remember a few of these, this is one of them that I hope you remember. So before the first day of principal photography even begins, the production sound mixer will have met with the producer and director to discuss the vision for the sound, what technical requirements they might have, and they may have also talked to the costuming department and visual effects supervisors to talk about how they're going to put microphones, so that they don't mess with the shot or the effects or the costumes. And then hopefully they also will have visited the filming locations to appropriately plan for the unique sound needs that those places may have. In the Rise of Skywalker, the location of the Death Star wreckage on Kefbir was a difficult one to capture sound for. If there's music required in a scene, production sound mixers, aided by their assistants, are also the people who set up speakers and playback equipment. And this can happen like if there's a live band playing or like maybe there's a karaoke scene or something. So yeah, they're the ones who do that. And then at the end of each shooting day, production sound mixers will also send their recorded files to post-production and maybe also give their footage to the camera assistant to use in the dailies. Production sound mixers are only on the job during pre-production and production. So it's mainly a production job. Once the film wraps, which means when the film is done filming, they're done. Then the sound goes over to the post-production sound people, which in this case is mainly Skywalker Sound, and they take over the sound work from there. So the production sound mixer is like the one who has to just capture everything as best as they can while they're filming. Again, on that Dolby Institute podcast, Matt Wood seemed very proud that they were able to use production sound from that Han Solo, Ben Solo scene on the Death Star wreckage, because it was like super windy and very difficult to capture. And he specifically credited and complimented Stuart Wilson for that. He said that Stuart Wilson's recording on this film was fantastic. That man loves Star Wars. He's such an artist at his job, and the tracks we get from him are incredible. So, yeah. Also in that same breath, he says, our dialogue team of Cheryl Nardi, James Spencer, Rich Quinn had to cut that all together and make that happen. And we used a lot of production, which is great. So we'll get to those three names very quick, very shortly. Okay, so underneath Stuart Wilson, we have several levels of assistants and trainees and interns. Okay. Yeah. I'm on screen circling where that is. Sorry, I covered up one of the names. Okay, so these are several levels of sound assistants. Sound assistants and trainees are there to assist the production crew in a number of ways. The first assistant, who is Orrin Beaton and Thomas Fennell, they tend to serve as boom operator, which means that they're holding those long boom poles with mics mounted on them, trying to get the microphones as close as possible to the actors' mouths without it getting in frame. The rest of the sound assistants and trainees and probably interns are going to be supporting the first assistant and production sound mixer. Usually experience-wise, it does go in order, like first assistants, second assistants, third assistants, etc. So yeah, they're going to be doing stuff like preparing and testing the equipment, changing batteries, clipping lav mics onto the actor's clothing, laying down carpet to dampen noise, loading and unloading the van, moving equipment where it needs to go and the sound cart, and making sure everyone is quiet on set, etc. So the second assistant sound was David Giles, and then sound trainee was Michael Fearon. Sound department intern was Finn George. Next on this list, we have one sound job underneath the heading editorial. So, yes, okay. That person, that credit, is additional sound design Robbie Stambler, who is down here. It's like, why is he all separate? Well, I believe that's because he is, you see he's listed with all these editors, that he was kind of part of some other team also doing a sound thing. Marianne Brandon, who was the lead editor for this film, is quoted in The Rise of Skywalker. It's an article on awardsdaily.com. I have a quote on screen from the interview where I think this elucidated a little bit of maybe what Robbie Stambler would have been doing. So they're talking about The Rise of Skywalker and how they had a shorter production time than usual. And she says, Marianne Brandon says, one of the things we did is that I moved the cutting room to my set, a mini version of my Avid. That's like a console. I have this incredible assistant I work with, Jane Tones, and she rigged it up so we could have these on-set cutting rooms in tents. And in addition to that, we have a mobile unit that would go wherever the camera went. So I was always within 10 feet of JJ. It really helped because I could pull up any reference at any time for scenes that he was doing, as well as between setups. We could sit and try to get some of the larger action scenes turned over to ILM for special effects. The real burden of starting later was visual effects time. We also carry the sound editor with us the entire time, so when sequences would get to a certain point, we'd turn it over to sound. Sound designer Robbie Stambler would do sound and punch things up, clear up dialogue. I add a lot of sound effects, but he would embellish them and try to make sequences. Also, Alex Levy, our music editor, would put in temp music. We were trying to get the sequences in a more polished form quicker than we usually do, even though we still spent time going over it, redoing it, and all the usual stuff we do. Anyway, based on where he is in the credits, I am guessing that Robbie Stambler was attached to editor Marianne Brandon's team, doing sound design and editing on the fly. And I'm so curious how much of his work remained in the final film, because it sounded like he was doing lots of stuff just on the fly, just so they could like have something quickly. Okay, anyway, the next thing we have is post-production sound services by Skywalker Sound, a Lucasfilm Limited company, Marin County, California. We've all heard of Skywalker Sound. Yeah, post-production. There it says it right there. So this is sound work happening after filming has been completed. The first people listed are sound effects editors Addison Teague and Justin Doyle. In the Dolby Institute podcast, Dave Accord referred to them as an A-list effects editing crew. We also have conforming editors, Koya Elliott and Steve Slanek. Dave Accord called Koya Elliott in that podcast an effects assistant, and then Matt Wood implied that she was also a dialogue assistant. So I'm wondering if certain levels of effects or sound assistants also do conforming. And conforming editors, what they do is they have the arduous task of re-editing and syncing audio to picture whenever there are changes. So they're just like always having to conform the audio to the visual. Maybe she was an assistant of some sort that mainly did that. And then there's dialogue supervisor Cheryl Nardi, dialogue editor James Spencer, and ADR editor Richard Quinn. And that's who I mentioned earlier that Matt Wood credited with, like, they had to piece all that sound together from the Han Solo, Ben Solo scene. That's them. We have assistant supervising sound editor Trey Turner, who also has a credit higher up along, what was his credit above? It was a credit with, it was an ADR mixer. So he also did ADR mixing. And then we have Foley supervisor. This is the Foley team, who are adding sounds in post-production. Frank Ranella, Foley editors, Dee Selby and Richard Gould, Foley artists, Ronnie Brown and Margie O'Malley, and Foley mixer, Blake Collins. In that same interview, Dave Accord referred to Frank Ranella, Ronnie Brown, Margie O'Malley, and Blake Collins as a Foley walking crew. So I don't know if that's like an industry nickname, like for the people who do Foley, just calling them the walking crew, like because they're making walking sounds. I don't know. I kind of like that idea. The next thing we see is, let's see, are we on the next slide yet? Jedi, let's see, where's Ben Burt? The next one is Ben Burt, and that is, okay. The next credit we have is Jedi vocal design, Ben Burt. I actually do not know what this means in this context. I'm guessing I know that they're talking about the voices of the Jedi, but like what exactly did Ben Burt do for that? Did he weigh in on how he wanted the overall sound world to be? Did he work on that scene himself? Like, I actually don't know, but I would love to know, and I would love to know like how it worked out that they tasked him with that particular job. Okay, next we have assistant re-recording mixer Jeff King, and I'm guessing that means he would have assisted Andy Nelson and Christopher Scarabozio, who were mentioned earlier. And again, the re-recording mixer is like taking all of the dubs and the like production audio. They're the ones that take all of the sound and put it all together in the final track. And then we have post-production services provided by Fox Studio Lot. Recordist. Let me get my face out of the way. We have recordist Luke Swartzweller and re-recording engineer Tom Lally. I'm actually not sure if there's a difference between re-recording engineer and re-recording mixer. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, next. Now here, finally we're at my favorite section, music. This is the big music heading. John Williams is not listed as composer because he was already in higher credit for that. In the music heading, we don't have that here, but on other films, this is often where you'll see the additional music by, which will be like if the composer uses assistants or other people to also write music, hopefully they'll be credited here. Sometimes they're not. That's a whole thing. Okay, so the first thing we have in this music section is music conducted by John Williams. So people often get the words composer and conductor mixed up. A composer is the person who writes the music, and a conductor is the person who waves their arms around in front of the orchestra and directs the music. In this case, John Williams was both. I'm going to skip around a little bit, and I'm going to go straight to music preparation. I'll come back to the other stuff, but music preparation, you'll see right here. Music preparation by Joanne Kane Music Service. They're a huge name in the biz. Everyone knows Joanne Kane Music on the music end of things. So music preparers are the people who make the sheet music that players read off of, clean and precise and easy to read. On the page, there are lots of film score conventions, even that differ from typical classical conventions. For example, in a film score, and by score, I mean, again, like the printed music. I mean, the music, the sheet music, basically. Time signatures and key signatures are written really nice and big. A lot of the times, sharps and flats will be used instead of key signatures. And time codes and measure numbers and rehearsal markings are in there. Another thing that music preparers do that is, kind of an industry convention is make the typefaces consistent, make sure that there's proper margins and paper size. The pages are arranged in an easy to read way, and the measures are spaced out in a readable way, and the staves, which is like the lines of music, are formatted in a way that facilitates convenient page turns, because if you have a bad page turn, it could disrupt the recording process and require stopping to handle that page turn. And same with cues that aren't properly labeled. Anyway, all of those things can add time, and basically the name of the game with music preparing for film is just make it as easy to read the first time as possible. Make it so clear. Another thing is make sure none of the specific articulations look sloppy, because the difference between a dot and a dash, or a dot slash dash, or a dot next to a note versus a dot below the note makes a big difference when you're reading music. And a lot of information can be conveyed in a music score in a very small space. I won't do a tangent about that now, but I think music notation is a remarkable invention, a remarkable thing that humans came up with and developed over a long period of time. Okay, after music preparation, the next person, or I guess not the next person, okay, I'm gonna skip around to here, and it'll make sense why in a second. We have music librarian Mark Graham. Now, Mark Graham is the owner of Joanne Kane Music, so he comes from Joanne Kane Music. So music librarian role is kind of related to the music preparation role in this case. A music librarian is in charge of sheet music. Orchestras, like normal classical orchestras, have music librarians as well. So the librarian distributes the right parts to everyone on the right days. They collect the parts at the end of the day. They make sure everyone has changes or additions, and they'll have, sometimes hand copy markings in, like bowings. If the principal player marked in bowings, the music librarian will copy those to each person's part, so the rest of the section has it. The music librarian also catalogs and keeps the massive amounts of sheet music organized. They change parts on the fly if something at the scoring session needs to change, which I'm guessing would have just been easier, because if Joanne Kane did the music preparation, then they would have all the files for the score. So they would have been the quickest people to take care of the music librarian needs. Sometimes, I don't know if this happens on film. I don't know if this happens on films because you could just easily reprint another part. But at least in the classical world, music librarians will often have to repair damaged parts as well. Because sometimes an orchestra maybe has used the same parts for a Beethoven symphony for like 30 years. And it's, the parts can get old. And if they've been like, the pencil markings have been erased a lot. Anyway. Okay. So now we're going to go up to underneath music conducted by John Williams. We have orchestrations by John Williams and William Ross. By the way, William Ross also wrote some music for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And if you listen to the soundtrack, you can, I can totally, it's so obvious which tracks on the soundtrack were by William Ross and which ones were Natalie Holt, because they are basically occupy entirely different sound worlds. I can't talk about that right now. But yes, William Ross has worked with John Williams a ton. The orchestrator's main job is to make the compositions playable by live players in the orchestra. The relationship between a composer and an orchestrator is usually super important because there has to be a high level of understanding between each party. In the past, composers would often write something on piano and then give that piano music to the orchestrator, who would then translate the piano sketch to an orchestral piece. Because orchestrators have that deep knowledge of the ranges of all the instruments, the different colors that different instruments can achieve, and they know the practical considerations of all the instruments. Orchestrators might be the one who decide whether to double a part or make something a solo, or to pass a melody line from the flute to the oboe while having the strings do a light chord texture. A lot of the time, I think orchestrators are the people, when people are complimenting like music on a film score, I think a lot of the time it's like done by the work, it's work done by the orchestrator. It's like pointing out different instrumental colors or different ways that things are flowing that maybe you wouldn't necessarily get when the composer just like played it on piano or something. But anyway, these days orchestrators aren't usually really typically getting a piano part anymore and doing all of that anyway. These days, orchestrators usually work off of a mock-up, which is essentially a recorded version of the score that has been programmed using virtual instruments. So an orchestrator's job today might be more like just recreating the mock-up for orchestral players and improving things that don't work for live players. Because like if you're a composer who's making a mock-up so you can hear how the score sounds, but it's virtual players, the virtual instruments might be able to make something sound good, and you might be able to like tweak something on the computer. But when you have live players trying to play the same thing, it might not actually work as well, and the tweaks might not be as simple as they were on the computer. So an orchestrator will do a lot of liaisoning, is that a word? Will kind of, be an intermediate step between getting it from the computer playing version and the live performance version. Okay, so I've explained what an orchestrator back in the day used to do more, what an orchestrator today usually does, and now all of that is a setup to say that, however, working with John Williams is different from even this new norm. It's different from the old norm, and it's different from the new norm. He doesn't really do either of those because John Williams writes very detailed sketches that are basically already orchestrated. Plus, he doesn't do virtual instrument mock-ups like other composers do. He simply, like in interviews, he's been asked about his tool set, and he simply never learned how to do anything else other than write by pencil and paper. So like he can't even do that. He doesn't know how to do that. So he just writes the music out by hand and waits for a real orchestra to play it, this is actually such an absurd thing to do in this day and age. And yes, it's what classical composers have historically done before notation software and digital audio workstations existed. But one of the reasons it is absurd in this day and age is, one, it's so slow, and two, unless studios simply won't pay for you to have a workflow like that anymore, not unless you're John Williams. So John Williams might be one of the last composers to even be afforded the ability to work in this older style. Most modern film composers compose in a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, and it's things like Logic and GarageBand and Pro Tools, and it goes a little bit something like this. I have open Logic Pro, which is a DAW, a digital audio workstation, and I'm going to do a really short demonstration of what composing in a DAW is basically like. Obviously, this is very crude. I don't have good sample libraries. This is not, this is a very, very, very stripped down version of it for those of you who have never worked in a DAW before. So the way it works is you have an idea for some music and you just record it directly into the program. So here I have a timpani sound, a session strings patch, a flutes, oboe, xylophone, and harp. I didn't really think too hard about these sounds, by the way. I just picked things that are in orchestras, so bear with me. So basically, I'm going to just record something, and you'll see how easy it is to add different instruments and test out how they sound together, and get instant feedback on how my ideas are shaping up. So let's just... Okay, so let's do that. Should I quantize even? I could quantize that. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this loop out so that we keep having timpani. It's not going to be long. But, okay, so now let's do some strings on top of that. I don't know. Okay, I'll take let's try some flutes. So basically what's happening is I'm just thinking oh, maybe it'd be cool to add flutes somewhere. Let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, and then maybe I'm oh, I'd like to get some oboes in on that. Let's see what that's like. And I'm oh, let's have the xylophone let's see what it's like if they double the strings. I don't know. And then I swear this is coming to a point in a second. Then I'm let's see if we can add harps. Okay, so as I have these ideas, I have been able to get instant feedback on what they sound like. And now one thing I'm noticing is you can't really hear the oboe part. It doesn't... The oboe doesn't... The oboe's not reading very well. So I can just delete that or let's try, giving it to other flutes instead, because you can just do that. Oh, and I think it'll read better an octave higher, so I can just select everything in that section and make it an octave higher. There we go. Right, so now I can hear that better. Okay. All of that is to say, okay, where am I in my notes? Sorry. It is so useful to be able to test out how your ideas sound. Like, I know this sounds really obvious, but DAWs like Logic Pro, GarageBand are incredible tools that have made music making and film scoring so much more accessible for people to get into. And it's amazing that they allow more people to express their creativity. But of course, also when composers learn how to compose in the DAW and regularly use that as their main means of doing so, it doesn't always, it can come at the expense of gaining orchestration expertise. For John Williams, who composes with pencil and paper, he has to apply all of his knowledge and experience about how different instruments blend together, how things might sound, whether the clarinet would be audible in a certain range, or if the melody should go to the oboe instead, or the flutes, how to distribute melodic and harmonic and rhythmic ideas amongst 80 to 100 players and dozens of instruments in a way that doesn't end up sounding muddy or imbalanced. He just knows that and writes it on paper, and then the orchestra plays it. He doesn't have a means for testing out his ideas in a software, and that's wild to me. Orchestration is so difficult, and he has that knowledge from his, not only from his training, but also coming up like in an older time in Hollywood and doing lots of orchestration himself. And just, he is a master of using the orchestra as a tool. And that is something that is not as common to be really, really good at these days. And now I don't want you to think that modern composers are just lazy or succumbing to shortcuts or don't want to get educated, because couldn't be further from the truth. A lot of modern composers really do want to learn orchestration, and they do learn it. But they're often just meeting the demands of the studios and productions, because it's also a pretty standard requirement on productions now that film composers provide mock-ups of their cues done with virtual instruments before recording sessions even start. Because it's not only composers who benefit from having playback capabilities, it's also useful for editors and directors to have a preview of what the score is going to sound like and already start cutting music to film, which will hopefully be replaced by the studio musicians later, though sometimes the mock-up actually is what the film ends up shipping with, and lots of times it's a blend between the live performance and the mock-up. But anyway, mock-ups are essential. They're an essential thing to know how to do to be a film composer in these modern times. And mock-ups can be very convincing to sound like an orchestra. This is also could be a whole other area of exploration that I won't belabor right now. But yeah, okay. I hope that demonstration was somewhat useful. I'm going to pull up a quote from a wonderful interview with Mark Graham from Joanne Kane Music. And this is about John Williams's the process of working with John Williams that sheds some light on his orchestration. Okay, he says, John Williams writes very detailed handwritten sketches. On the prequels, these sketches went to orchestrators. The orchestrators would write pencil scores, and we would copy parts into Finale. Finale is a music software notation, a music notation software, by the way. But for the past 6 or 7 years, i.e. the sequel trilogy, John has just sent the sketches directly to us. We put them straight into Finale. I've kind of edited them, checked them out myself, and then we've used them at the stage for recording. What this quote says to me is it's basically confirming that John Williams has mostly written the orchestration directions via his normal shorthand and in his detailed sketches. And that the music preparers at Joanne Kane just fleshed the shorthand out without much of an intermediary orchestrator to speak of. So when I say that John Williams writes very detailed sketches, I mean, I believe it's 6. I should have this pulled up, but it's like, is it 6 or 10 stave? It's sketches that have basically all of the parts accounted for. So it's like, it's not just a couple staves of piano part. It's like a line for strings, a line for like woodwinds. And, you know, the woodwind line might have like 3 notes at a time, you know, which a single woodwind instrument can't play. But he has his kind of shorthand of like, if it's 3 of them like this, labeled like this, that means it goes to the flutes and oboes or something. So even when he does like overtly use orchestrators, they have often said that it already is, the orchestrating instructions are basically already there. They're fleshing it out though, and interpreting what he means by stacking, you know, say a triad or stacking multiple things. I don't want to dismiss the work of orchestrators, even orchestrators for John Williams, for sure, because I believe they still are making choices a lot of the time. And Frank Lehman knows more about that than I do. But yeah, for the sequels, it seems like John Williams just sent his sketches directly to the music preparer, and then they just prepared from his sketches. Another thing I know is that at the scoring sessions, at the recording sessions, John Williams doesn't even like read from the formally prepared music. He reads from his pencil sketches. So it just shows how much information already is orchestrated in his sketches, because how else would he know like how to conduct, which instruments to bring in? Like he knows what orchestration ideas he has. And this level of this way of orchestrating is very unique. Okay. Of course, granted, William Ross is also credited with orchestrating too, so clearly he must have helped, and I don't want to overlook him. I just would love to know, I would love to talk to him. I would love to know what part of the process he helped with, or if he took the lead on specific arrangements of cues. Because I know, like, with the Kenobi show, it's not like he co-composed with Natalie Holt. It's like he composed entirely separate cues. So maybe there was something like that. Anyway, for comparison, Solo: A Star Wars Story credits 12 orchestrators. Okay. Next on this list. Oh yeah, back to the original music slide. We have scoring engineer Sean Murphy. And Sean Murphy on other movies is credited as a score recordist. So I'm not sure if this is different, if this is like a different role here, or if they just called it scoring engineer this time for other reasons. But anyway, as a scoring engineer, he was likely overseeing the actual recording of the score, like the scoring sessions, and deciding on the strategy for capturing the sound. That could be like the placement of microphones, how they're going to space people out, similar to what we were talking about with production sound mixer, being responsible for capturing the production sound. This would be, this would be the person responsible for capturing the, production music sound, if you will. Next, we have music contractor, Sandy DeCrescent. Big name. You'll see her on so many films, like thousands. She's contracted musicians for thousands of films. For the original trilogy and prequel trilogy, the score was recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra, which is a pre-established group that already was playing together as a unit. For the sequel trilogy, and honestly most films I can think of nowadays, the score was recorded in LA by session musicians, and those session musicians have to be hired by a contractor. Sandy DeCrescent is the person who hired the musicians for The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. As I said, she's a huge name in this realm of things. She has known John Williams since the 1960s and has contracted orchestras for thousands of films. Nowadays, she's assisted by Timothy Liu and Peter Rotter. And if you recognize Peter Rotter's name, it's because, these are also music contractors that are really big names. Peter Rotter recently penned an open letter sounding the alarm on the LA recording industry being on the brink of collapse. And I do recommend reading that. It is something I care about deeply. Peter Rotter also contracted the musicians for a score that I personally played on last year. But it is something that I care about because in my normal professional life, one of the things is that I'm a session musician, a violinist. So there is a trend of composers having to record their scores overseas, like in London or Budapest or something like that, because the film studios don't want to have to abide by union rules to keep the work in Los Angeles. And this has been happening, for a while now, but the devastation it's been like a slow burning, I don't know, it's been tragic, especially for those people who saw the transition from, this is all, okay, wait, nope, I need to stop myself from going on this tangent. Anyway, it is amongst recording musicians, it is like a very big, passionate topic that a lot of us have that is like, please try to keep scoring work in LA. Work something out with the union, please. But, studios will often cheap out and not want to do that. But anyway, okay. Next we have scoring editor, Robert Wolf. And I also wonder if earlier I said there was a job where people are like editing on the fly at the scoring sessions. And I'm wondering if Robert Wolf was part of that as well. We also have Alex Levy, music editor. And he was quoted in that quote from Marianne Brandon, the editor. So, it seems like he was doing a lot of putting in temp music on the fly. We also have an additional music editor, Peter Miles. The choir is the Los Angeles Master Chorale, who is a pre-established group. And the Master Chorale is conducted, the artistic supervisor is Grant Gershon, and that wasn't just for this film, like he is in real life the artistic, director of the Los Angeles Master Chorale. And then vocal contractor Elise Willis. So I guess maybe they additionally had a vocal contractor. I'm guessing there are more people in the chorale than were used for the film. Like they probably didn't use literally every single person that is in the Master Chorale, though I'm not 100% sure. And then we see score recorded and mixed at the Streisand scoring stage, Sony Pictures, Culver City, California. This is a really iconic scoring stage where The Wizard of Oz in 1939 film score was recorded here. Also An American in Paris in 1951, Ben-Hur in 1959, Lawrence of Arabia in 1962, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park. I mean, this is like the most iconic, probably, scoring stage that still exists. It also used to be, it's on the Culver City lot of Sony Pictures, which used to be MGM Studios. I recorded a score there last year, and like when you go there, you see a huge rainbow, which is like a reference to Wizard of Oz. Anyway, excitingly, as of January 2024, the building that houses the Streisand scoring stage is actually called the John Williams Music Building. So that was that's a relatively recent addition. I have a photo on screen of when they unveiled the place. So this was a point of confusion that I had. I was like, did they rename it from Streisand scoring stage to the John Williams stage or music building? But no, the stage is still called the Streisand scoring stage. It's just the building is called the John Williams Music Building. Anyway, next we have the scoring stage crew, which is Greg Denon, Ryan Nelson, Keith Ukrishna, Brian Van Leer. I have a feeling there was more crew than that, but I'm not sure. Scoring stage crew is super important. They set up all the chairs, stands, podiums, platforms, baffles and other sound-absorbing shields, mics, headphones, headphone amps, monitors. There's so much to set up, and I'm not exactly sure how the duties were split up or how many other uncredited stage crew members there were, but someone at these sessions also had to do all the technical wiring, like wire all the microphones, consoles, the clocking devices, figure out the monitoring, because John Williams himself would have had like a monitor in front of him to be watching the movie, projection systems, and all that. I mean, also there's audio monitoring, just many levels of monitoring. Notably, the individual orchestral musicians and singers are not credited here, which tends to happen in films. In fact, there are a lot of uncredited people who work on films. So this is a question I get a lot, like, why aren't the musicians credited? And I think almost instead of asking why the musicians aren't credited, it might be worth asking why the people who are credited, which usually comes down to whether or not the union or the individual's contract has negotiated for a credit. I mean, back in the day, credits were so much shorter, which didn't mean that fewer people were working on films, I'm sure, but like it doesn't mean like, oh, only this short amount of credits that fit at the beginning of the movie. That's all who worked on it. It just not a lot of people were uncredited, and now more people have negotiated to be credited. On this topic, Mark Sazer, who is president of the Recording Musicians Association, once said, we'll read a quote, "I can tell you, we tried for several rounds of motion picture negotiations before my time to get credit crawl for musicians without success. Virtually every square centimeter of credit crawl has been negotiated by other unions at great cost. However, when we were able to negotiate into the contract provisions for the release of soundtracks that allowed a certain number of free units in exchange for including the full orchestra credits on the liner notes or jewel case, an unforeseen benefit was that musicians were added to the credit crawl for a certain number of films that had taken advantage of those provisions. And some filmmakers just have a thing about it. They like musicians, so for example, Pixar will frequently list all of us in the credits." So that is Mark Sazer, president of the Recording Musicians Association. I think there's a lot in that quote. It says a lot. Yeah, every square centimeter of credit crawl has been negotiated by other unions at great cost, and then sometimes it just comes down to whether the filmmakers just have a certain soft spot for it. Regarding the special like provision that he mentions, for the Rise of Skywalker, the musicians are credited in the liner notes for the physical album, but unfortunately it didn't translate to the musicians also being listed in the end credits of the film. But suffice it to say, whether or not musicians are listed in the crawling credits has to do with a lack of having that specifically negotiated for, and also not having a champion behind the scenes insisting that they do get credit. But here are the here on screen are the credited musicians. Photo taken from the liner notes of checked out from the library just to take picture of this. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Something I'll say is the concert master of this orchestra. I'm gonna circle him right here. Roger Wilkie. That was the concertmaster for this orchestra. He's been serving as John Williams' concertmaster on films since 2005. And he is John Williams' preferred concertmaster. This name here, you'll see Bing Wang, or Bing Wang. If you see, if you ever watch the LA Phil perform at the Hollywood Bowl, she usually serves as concertmaster and plays like the solos and stuff on Schindler's List and all the other things. But yeah, Roger Wilkie apparently is his preferred concertmaster. He is also, Roger Wilkie, the concertmaster of the Long Beach Symphony, which is an orchestra that I have been playing with as a sub this year. And in fact, I am going to see Roger tonight at our concert. And I have been seeing him all this past week at rehearsals sitting, he's like, I have never talked to him. I am a little bit intimidated, but I'm working up the courage, and I hope that he someday comes on this podcast, because he's very, very good, and I want to know what it's like being John Williams' concertmaster. One more thing about whether musicians are credited. The thing about getting credited in a film is it's not a problem limited to musicians. There are a lot of departments or subdepartments that only list the head people or individual artists who subcontract work or work with a bigger team that doesn't get credited. If it's a big group like the London Symphony Orchestra, you'll see a group named. And if you see Sandy DeCrescent, like we were looking at earlier, if you see Sandy DeCrescent credited for contracting, then you know that the score was recorded by pickup players in Los Angeles. Okay, the next thing, we're almost done with the music credits. Almost done with the music and sound credits. The next thing we have is under the production heading. We have assistant to Mr. Williams, Brittany Fine, and dialect coach, Jim McCullough. Next, we have the second unit heading right here. And we have a production sound mixer and a first assistant sound in there. So the second unit is basically a whole separate shooting team that helps out by filming pickup shots or action scenes with stunt performers and stuff like that. They may also do establishing shots or other shots that don't involve the main cast or the main action. Having a second unit can help streamline the production, making it go by faster. The second unit can shoot simultaneously with the first unit in different locations. But some directors do not use second units for their films. Christopher Nolan, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Quentin Tarantino, to name a few. But yes, George Lucas has used second and even third units for his films in the past, and apparently has complained about the quality of their work. I don't know exactly the stories about that, but you want to have a good second unit who understands what the overall vision for the film is. Otherwise, it'll be too obvious which shots were done by the first unit and the second unit. But anyway, Victoria Mahoney was the second unit director for The Rise of Skywalker. You won't see it. I don't think you see it on the screen because it would have been earlier, like a higher up credit. But this was the first time a Star Wars film had used a woman director. Anyway, the sound credits, like I said, were production sound mixer, Tim White, AMPS, and first assistant sound, Andrew Simmons, who would have been the boom operator, as discussed earlier. Last but not least, we have the two pieces of source music credited right before the Walt Disney Records logo, very end of the film. So we have Lido Hay, written by Lin-Manuel Miranda and J.J. Abrams, produced and performed by Shag F. Kava. And we have Oma's Place. Oma Trace is John Williams' cameo character, anagram for Maestro. And Oma's Place was written, produced, and performed by Ricky Tinez and J.J. Abrams. A note about Shag F. Kava is, in The Force Awakens, the fictional band Shag F. Kava is actually credited as Shag Kava minus the F. And according to Lin-Manuel Miranda, Shag is made up of his and JJ's kids' initials, and Kava is made up of the first syllables of their wives' names. And between The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, Lin-Manuel Miranda had another kid, so they added the F initial. Okay. I think that's everyone in the music and sound department. The next thing we're going to do is compare the end credits transitions in all 9 Star Wars Skywalker Saga films. This is Episode 9. This is the last of the 3 trilogies. And I think getting into the end credits is a really is a really interesting thing. And actually, this whole practice was inspired by a recent episode with Frank Lehman. That was 2 episodes ago. It was called The Poetic Ending. And I'm actually going to play an excerpt from that episode on 1.25 speed. So it won't be too slow, but it also won't be so fast that it'll break the people who are listening to this on 1.5 speed already. So I'm going to play you what Frank was saying about the way that the Rise of Skywalker ends. I asked him, is there anything special about the way that the Rise of Skywalker transitions to the end credits? And this is what he said.
Has become obligatory. So the horn solo that concludes this film is identical to the one that ends Force Awakens, and I think also maybe there's a few tiny modifications Last Jedi, and all 3 are adaptations of the ending of Revenge of the Sith, which concludes with the Lars family looking over with infant Luke, with a statement of the Force theme in G minor. For The Force Awakens, Williams added a little 3 measure tag at the conclusion of the film, to lead into the end credits for that sort of weird rotating helicopter shot that felt very un-Star Wars-y at the time. And that already that I feel is a little awkward. It feels a little grafted on. And that may be actually my least favorite usage, because after The Force Awakens, what had been this kind of weird, seemingly unnecessary, slightly adjusted appropriation from Episode 3's finale, a kind of rehash of that, it then becomes simply an obligatory framing part in the same exact way, doing exactly the same thing as the main titles do. So this is a bit retcon-y, but with 4 of the 9 Skywalker Saga films now ending the film portion before the end credits, the main diegesis, with a G minor statement of the Force theme, it's just a formally necessary component of the score. Just as important, just as expected as the B-flat major main theme at the beginning. It hadn't always been that way, though, so I would have preferred that each final shot was given unique music, right? And it seemed like that was going to be the way for the first 6 movies. And we have wonderful contrasting kinds of endings for all 6 of them, but here it assumes a different function. I kind of made peace with that, so we must close the Star Wars saga film now with Star Wars' most mythical theme, right?
In this clip, Frank is basically expressing some thoughts about it, and also just stating what is fact about the way that the Rise of Skywalker ends, and not just the Rise of Skywalker, but also The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, which is a statement of the Force theme going into the credits, beginning, in fact, so specifically with a G minor statement on the horn of the Force theme going into the end credits. So that's one layer of what he's saying, is it didn't used to always be this obligatory ending Force theme, but now it is. And then he's also saying that in Revenge of the Sith, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, a couple bars have been added to the end of it to justify the transition to the end credits. In Revenge of the Sith and The Last Jedi, it's a shorter thing going into the credits. And then in The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, it's this like even extra bars that are, you'll hear because I'm going to play all of the transitions to the end credits in order. And I am going to start with the original trilogy, then the prequel trilogy, then the sequel trilogy. And this whole time, I want you to be thinking about which ones are your favorites, which transitions to the end credits do you like the best? Yeah, no better time to do that than Rise of Skywalker season. That was in Star Wars: A New Hope, Throne Room going to the end credits. Next, we have Empire Strikes Back. So that has Han and Leia going into the end credits. Now we have Return of the Jedi. Don't worry, I will play both versions, starting with the original one. I think it's really interesting how that one has like the vocals sustaining while the end credits are starting. I think that's really interesting. Okay, so now we have Return of the Jedi Special Edition and Beyond version with Victory Celebration. I actually find this one kind of unsettling. I don't want to skew your opinions. I shall withhold my opinions, and then talk about them at the end. Sorry. Okay. I'll tell you why in a bit. Now we have the prequel trilogy, starting with The Phantom Menace. And that was Augie's Great Municipal Band. And now we have Attack of the Clones. And that was Across the Stars going into the end credits. Now we have Revenge of the Sith. So that was the Force theme with the kind of it wasn't a lot of bars. It was just like a few extra notes. And then we have The Force Awakens. So that's Force theme. I think that one's really mixed, interestingly. That was The Last Jedi, of course, ending with the Force theme. And finally, we have The Rise of Skywalker. Okay, just to be totally complete in terms of live action Star Wars movies, I also have the ones for Rogue One.
The transmission we received. What is it they've sent us?
Hope.
Ending with the Force theme. and Solo: A Star Wars Story. That one ending with Corellia Chase, or I guess you could call it the young Han Solo theme, and then a little bit of like alluding to the Rebel fanfare there. But anyway, do you have a favorite last piece transitioning to the end credits? And the secondary question is, do you think Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, is also going to end with the Force theme? Do you think we will exit this rut? I mean, the thing is, I love the Force theme, so I'm not mad when it happens. But hearing all the other ones, the Throne Room, Across the Stars, Augie's Municipal Band, just hearing all the other options that we had prior to the sequel trilogy, it does make me feel kind of disappointed that we have stuck with basically the same formula going into the end credits. Because, as Frank said, it's a little bit of retconny. It's like a new standard that never had to be a standard to begin with. So just a question to consider. Let me know which one your favorites are, and if you think The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to end with the Force theme as well. I think there's a chance it could go either way. I will say that my favorites, I think, I was going back and forth a lot. I really like the Across the Stars one from Attack of the Clones. Really like Augie's from The Phantom Menace, and really like Han and Leia going into the end credits for Empire Strikes Back. Those are probably my favorites. And then in terms of the ones that end with the Force theme, I should also say I like all the ones that end with the Force theme, because I think they're all really good, except the Rogue One I think is awkward. But I mean, I think all the ones, the saga films that end with the Force theme, I think that's also very good. And when when Revenge of the Sith did it, it was the first time they had done that too. The first time they had done that. So I give Revenge of the Sith the credit of doing the Force theme thing first. And I think it worked really well in that movie. The thing is, the extra few bars added for The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. I'll play the Rise of Skywalker one again. I actually like them. Like, I like those weird, funky bars at the end. And I'm going to highlight a YouTube comment. Red Kaio on YouTube says, hard disagreeing with Frank's dislike of the extra bars. They say, those added measures from The Force Awakens were used in The Rise of Skywalker completely saved the key change, making it feel earned and satisfying. Whereas the shorter one from Revenge of the Sith reused in The Last Jedi has an awful transition. The key change is jarring and off-putting. So I don't agree that the key change is jarring and off-putting in Revenge of the Sith and The Last Jedi. I also like it there. But I also agree that I do like the added measures in The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. Already, I've talked to one person about this who very much agrees with Frank and disagrees with me and thinks and doesn't like those added measures. So this is another thing to weigh in on. Do you like the added measures in The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker? Or do you prefer the more shortened version in Revenge of the Sith and The Last Jedi? Let me know. I'll do a little bit more light commentary now on the rest of these, just because I can't resist. Sorry. What I like about the Throne Room one, let me turn this down. What I like about the Throne Room one, can't talk while music is playing, unfortunately. Okay. What I like about the Throne Room one is that is it that it's diegetic? It's like pseudo-diegetic, but it is music that is in such a completely different character than most of the rest of the film. You know, it's this like pomp and circumstance type Elgarian type of Walton-esque type of cue for the medal ceremony. The reason I think the victory celebration one is unsettling to me is because of the crossfade that is happening into the credits. I'll play that one again. I don't like that. It's like when you have crossfade turned on like whatever your music player is and the next song starts playing way too soon. I feel like that's what's happening there. I find it fascinating that on the soundtrack for the Return of the Jedi, they handle that transition differently. They have Victory Celebration just kind of end with like a blast and then separately start the end credits. We'll talk more about this next season, so I won't dwell on this Return of the Jedi one. Okay, now advancing slides. Okay. So now we're going to do the podcast intro, outro music. You've been hearing this at the beginning and ends of episodes. It is my cover of Anthem of Evil. It's been a lot of fun every season to pick music from the movie that we're covering and to, I don't know, do a little something creative myself. But I tried to stuff as many themes as possible into it. And across all social media, Red Kaio, got the closest to guessing what all the themes were. Got almost all of them. But now I will play it and I will have on screen when the themes come up. And yeah, here you go. Yeah, so you have the Kylo Ren aggressive in the violin pizzicato. My piano is muted. Okay. Sorry, I can't remember what I played. At the beginning. By the way, there's the reason there's so many times that I do the pizzicato at the beginning is because the purpose of the beginning, fashioning intro, outro music for the podcast, I have to keep a few things in mind. I have to keep in mind the fact that I don't know how long the intro that I'm going to read is exactly, because I'll be like, this episode is about something, something with guests, something, something from something, something. And I wanted to just make sure to leave enough room the beginning can be chopped off as much as needed. And then I want the hit point to be when the melody comes in, that's when the music gets loud. So if you listen to like all of the podcast covers that I've done, they all kind of have a vamp part at the beginning. Okay, just to remind, this is Asteroid Field. Oh no, that's not the full thing. Sorry. I don't know where my Asteroid Field cover is, so that's a fine. Oh no, I got it. So you'll hear the vamping at the beginning. that's where it gets loud. And then for solo, you'll hear the vamping at the beginning. So yeah, there's a formula to it. Okay, so yeah, the pizzicato is doing Kylo Ren's theme, and then the main melody is Psalm of the Sith, which is, you know, the Anthem of Evil melody. And then we have Knights of Ren, both the fast form and the slow form. The fast form is, what is the fast form? The fast form is, it's this. And then is Ray Gallup. And then is Luke's stand, which you might know as the spark. I mean, this is very loose application of these themes. Okay, don't read into it too much. There's also somewhere in there, Journey to Exegol. You'll hear that a little bit, and it's from that. And then the Knights of Ren slow form is at the very end. Yeah. Okay. So that's the podcast intro outro music. It feels kind of daunting to think about how I'm going to do the next seasons, but that's a problem for me maybe in a couple months. Anyway, the transcriptions you see on screen are taken from Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars, which you can and should download for free at franklehman.com/Star Wars. And finally, we're transitioning to the next section of the agenda today, and that is reading What Does Star Wars Sound Like? At the end of every episode of this show, didn't do it first season, started it second season. I've been asking every guest the same three questions, which is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like? And the second question is, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about? The third question is, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of, besides anything Star Wars? And I always find it so interesting what 3 words people pick. And I think putting all of the words together sometimes paints like a really beautiful picture. And I keep thinking like I want to like make something like a poster or t-shirts or something that incorporates all the 3 words. I don't know. But anyway, okay. Here is what this season guests thought Star Wars sounds like in exactly 3 words. Poetic, epic, hopeful. Wondrous space magic. Adventure, heart, saga. Subtle, except not. Excellent job, sir. Terrible job, sir. That was a reference to Heartbreak, whimsy, romance. Loud, proud, in charge. Symphonic, complex, multi-layered. Resilience, youth, legacy. Williams, Goranson, Giacchino. Ben Burt rules. Classical, timeless storytelling. A major lift. Epic, adventure, emotion. Ethereal, panoptic, permeating. Epicness, imagination, thoroughness. Nostalgic, orchestral vocabulary. Ben Burt's closet. Woob woob woob. Brass, adventure, heroic. Emotions, timeless, magic. One of one. Dramatic, colorful, home. Growing bacteria culture. Peace and Promise. Epioques, sorry, new portmanteau just dropped. Epic, sweeping, grandiose. Mature score, improv. Pure symphonic escapism. Never-ending endings. Enigma, adventure, epic. And then I will add mine. Let me get my face off screen. I will add mine, which is genius and craftsmanship. This is a reference to the episode with Catherine Coldiron. That was episode 4, I believe. She asked whether I thought John Williams was a genius or a craftsman. And I believed that I believe that he is both. And it was like ended up being just a really good conversation. And I feel like, I just feel like Star Wars, the music of Star Wars, and I guess at least John Williams is part of it, is both, has both elements of genius, like the spark, the inspiration, the talent, but also just someone who knows the craft of it and how to do it on a level beyond simply divine inspiration, because that can never be. I don't think an artist can get by, at least someone with a career like John Williams. I don't think you can get by on just genius alone. And I think the craftsmanship and the experience, the resume that he's built up over decades is really impressive and part of also what he does. Okay. So now I'm going to just say the rest of my answers to the questionnaire. Question number 2. Oh, I guess I have to tell you my previous answers. So my previous answers were filigree, fanfares, flow, intricate orchestral storytelling, and the cosmic force. Okay, question number 2 is, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about? And my answer is that I want to see or hear what John Williams' very first drafts and seeds of ideas sound like. And then I want to see how he refines the music until he's satisfied with it. Because I mean, we don't really get to see his like actual rough, like vulnerable seeds of the first drafts. And I want to know how they develop, like how fully formed they come out or not. Previous answers, I wanted to know if there's an internal sonic style guide at Lucasfilm or Skywalker Sound that's specific to Star Wars. And then I wanted to know more about the working relationship between the composer and music editor. And then I wanted to know, I said I was curious about how other people experience and engage with the music of Star Wars, how other people are making sense of it or analyzing it with frameworks different than mine, which is basically like doing this podcast helps me in that question. And then finally, what is a score or soundtrack that I'm fond of besides anything Star Wars? This season, I will say, lately, I've recently been impressed by the score to Baby Girl, a film starring Nicole Kidman. And the score is by Cristobal Tapia de Veer, who also did White Lotus, which I haven't seen. But I really loved the movie Baby Girl. And I thought the soundtrack was so appropriate for it. I don't want to say much more, but just I liked that one. Previous answers were E.T., Moonrise Kingdom, and There Will Be Blood by Johnny Greenwood. As we near the end of this episode, I want to call attention to several things that you may or may not know about with regards to Star Wars Music Minute. First of all, the Star Wars Music Minute website, starwarsmusicminute.com, is actually a functional place that you can visit and use. I'm not trying to plug it or anything. You don't have to use it. But I just want to let you know that every episode of this show is on here. And and if you click on any episode, each episode is also tagged with the set of minutes and the guest. So if you want to find like all of Frank Lehman's episodes, for example, you can just scroll to where the tag is at the bottom, click on his name, and then you can see all of the episodes where his episodes are. I also think it's kind of, I mean, I think it's kind of fun to just click on the minutes too. So you can see which, you can see which movies have minutes at that section and kind of compare. Okay, that might be a nerdy application of that. But anyway, I think it's very helpful for getting all the episodes from a guest that you like. I set the whole website thing up this season, at least the episodes, because I wanted every episode to have a stable page to link to outside of the individual streaming platforms. Because I switched podcast hosts at the beginning of the season, and all of the audio links I had tweeted out in the previous seasons are dead now. And I want to avoid that kind of thing in the future. So now, yeah, every episode you can watch wherever, you can watch and listen wherever you normally do. But if you ever want a stable link to share and you don't know what streaming platform people use, you could always just go to the website and you'll see the show notes and you'll see the link to it on YouTube and a way to stream the audio, etc. Also on the website, as of the time of this recording, I have a comm link set up. I still have a comm link set up, I should say. So if you want to leave questions with your actual voice, you can click on that. It's basically just a voice recorder thingy. You don't even have to put in any information in there if you don't want to. Yeah. So for example, look, I'm going through it just to test it out. Just press this. You're like, here is my question that I have. Is this the same thing that takes place at this other part of the movie? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Stop recording. Press to proceed. You can skip this part where you add your name and email. That is just if you want me to know who sent me the message. You do not have to do that. You don't even have to put NA. You can just press the next button. And then it may look like there's a long progress bar happening, but it will send me the audio of what you asked. And then I can play it on the show. And yeah, it's very fun. Yeah, transmission received. May the force be with you. Second order of business. There is no way I could make Star Wars Music Minute without my patrons. Here they are on screen. Yes, all these beautiful names that you see at the end of the episode, these are my patrons. Being able to play audio examples from the movies, as well as other music examples, is, I feel, crucial to being able to give the depth of commentary that I think this music deserves. And as a result, I basically can't ever monetize episodes of Star Wars Music Minute, certainly not very easily. The show also just takes so much research and preparation, and that is very much on me, but it is very much something that I love to do and something that this audience really responds to and that I respond to. Also, the audience for a show like this is like a niche within a niche within a niche. So if you're listening to this right now, you're probably in that niche, and I really thank you for being here to begin with. So if you are able to, please support me on Patreon. You will get access to my Discord server, which is a lot of fun. We talk about movies and music and baking and other stuff, obviously Star Wars. It's also a great way to ask me questions about the show, like if you have a question about something that was explained on an episode, or you know, sometimes I'll say like, what minutes are coming up? Do you have any questions from that set of minutes? I also recently started a new Patreon exclusive podcast for my $3 and up patrons. That's US dollars, where my partner Ender blindsides me with interview questions. Last week, Ender asked me how much I like word games, which is a lot. It's too much, probably. And the week before that, it was about my first time watching Mission Impossible. It's a very unpredictable new podcast for me, but it's also very fun and nice to not be the host. I'm going to play a preview of that. But then, in Mission Impossible 2, the amount of times a mask was used, like, I'm looking in my notes, like, I don't think I like the mask thing I see. And then, who is Ethan talking to? How can I trust that anyone isn't just wearing a mask? Because I felt betrayed a couple times by the filmmakers. Like, the misdirection was just, it made me not want to take any scene seriously, like, that had high stakes. It made me just, think all the time,
it's probably someone in a mask. This isn't real. It's probably someone in a mask. And I didn't like that.
Yeah. Don't at me with your Mission Impossible thoughts. Actually, you should. You can and should. But anyway, more than anything, all of your support on Patreon for those who are patrons means so much to me, and it means that I can keep making Star Wars Music Minute and keep making it better. So if you can, and if you want to help me make more Star Wars Music Minute, then become a patron, because it really helps. And again, thank you to all my current patrons who have made Star Wars Music Minute possible up until now. I truly feel so grateful to you. So now that Star Wars Music Minute is done for the season, I will be taking my customary break and getting my ducks in the row to begin Return of the Jedi season. In the off season, make sure you're subscribed to Star Wars Music Minute on YouTube, because I'll be covering Andor Season 2 with the Band Batch, and also other TV shows that come up. These are live streams, and when the Band Batch reviews TV shows, I don't publish those episodes to the audio podcast. They're just on YouTube, and they're just live streams or video. There's also a chance that I'll make some other YouTube videos on Star Wars music and related topics. We will see. I swear my Thrawn video it keeps getting bigger. It keeps getting it bigger in my idea for it. Maybe it'll happen. You'll also catch me playing live music for the Star Wars Live Table Reads presented by Patrick Kottner from the George Lucas Talk Show and Pete the Retailer and Alex Robinson from Star Wars Minute. The live reads for The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith are already up on YouTube to watch for free. And the next one that we're doing is A New Hope in March. Go to swliveread.com for all of the relevant links and to watch the previous Star Wars live reads. There's always a live stream portion available if you can't make it out to the show in LA. So yeah, that'll be another thing that I will be up to. And finally, I want to thank some key people whose contributions to Star Wars Music Minute make the podcast better and make my life easier. Nick Norton has been editing my podcasts for the past few seasons now, and you should definitely hit him up if you need any sound work. He is newly a member of the MPSE, that's the Motion Picture Sound Editors, so now he can use those 4 letters after his name in credits. Ender Smith for being a constant springboard for my ideas. They provided lots of helpful feedback as I was putting together this presentation in particular. And if you've seen some snazzy thumbnails on my YouTube channel for Skeleton Crew, those were all Ender's doing, painstakingly photoshopping musical instruments into the characters' hands every week. I want to thank the Band Batch, which is my friends James Waterman, Justin Scheid, and Christina Ward, for covering the Star Wars TV shows with me and injecting a brilliant energy into everything that we do together that is far beyond what I personally am capable of. Of course, I want to thank Frank Lehman for all of his scholarship and enthusiasm with regard to Star Wars and John Williams, and for making the thematic catalog that I reference so frequently. I want to thank Pete and Alex from Star Wars Minute, who pioneered the Movies by Minutes thing and encouraged me to start this show. And last but not least, we have the guests this season. No, that's the wrong slide. That's fine. The guests this season, Claudia Amenabar, Riley Silverman, Catherine Coldiron, Alex Cunningham, Connor Power, Sawyer Markham, Patrick Kottner, Dominic Sewell, Camila Quinones, Brendan Winerty, Tony Thaxton, Darth Chaco, Element 7, Marianne Lawrence, Star Wars Lawyer, Steve Danielson, Dan Golding, Alex Robinson, Pete the Retailer, Jeremy Sauruk, Catherine Neen, John Hoey, Samantha Tripp, Christina Ward, James Waterman, Justin Scheid, Ender Smith, Nathan Fontaine, Frank Lehman, and Dennis Ham. Whew, that was a lot of good guests this season. Anyway, yeah. So thank you all for being here and listening to me and for your insightful comments and suggestions that I'm always getting. Sorry that it took me so long to respond to YouTube comments this season, but I did get to all of them, and yeah, a lot of them I just responded like, wow, you're right. I totally hear that. Anyway, please keep in touch with me and let me know what you think, whether on Discord or YouTube comments or just through the other social media avenues. And don't forget to answer the question I asked at the beginning of this episode regarding what order I should cover the rest of the movies in. And with that, I'll catch you sometime later on Star Wars Music Minute. May the Force be with you.